It is God's context. It's the way he set the world in motion to be, and the mere fact that we have this murky problem describes how far away we are from seeing the world through his context. All right. So let's start in verse 15. I secretly got them to not put a clock up there. So there was originally supposed to be a clock on that TV, but it's not on, so I'm free. All right. Let's see. Let's start at verse 15. We're talking about Jesus, who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature. I can't do that. We got to go back to verse 12. That's too much in the middle of a sentence. Giving thanks unto the Father, which hath made us meet to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in light. And as we described last week, describing that he made us meet, he made us worthy. Through the activity of his Son, he made us worthy to be partakers of the inheritance with his Son, all right, of the saints in light, who hath delivered us from the powers of darkness and hath translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son. So we've got the context of God the Father and God the Son. The Holy Spirit's in there too, but those are the ones that have just been mentioned. And then we've got the context of the powers of darkness. And we were in the one, and he translated us and takes us over here into the other. Not only taking out of the context of the powers of darkness, and putting us into the context of, I'm going to read it so I don't, partakers of the inheritance of the saints in light. All right, he's not only done that, but he's made it so that we're not strangers in this context. We fit this context. We're supposed to be in this context. We are not aliens and strangers in his new world. We are designed to be there. We are his. All right? So much so that the powers of darkness should seem like another planet to us, a completely different context that we no longer belong to because he's translated us from that into his. All right? Who hath delivered us from the powers of darkness and translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son, in whom we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sins. Third context, yours. We've had God's, we've had the world, powers of darkness. Now we get your context. Your context was that you were lost and dead in your sin and needing of forgiveness and redemption. Without hope, lost as dead people in a dying world. You had no hope. And that was the lens through which you experienced the world. If you haven't noticed, I'm doing my best to take back identity politics. Okay? In whom we have redemption through his blood. That's what we needed. And so in order to take us out of the powers of darkness and translate us into the kingdom of his dear Son, he had to change us so that we saw the world through a lens that was no longer slave, but was now free inheriting son. All right? Because if you take a slave and then make him live in his master's house, not as a slave, he's going to freak out having no context for anything. All right? He didn't just pick us up and move us. He changed us so that it would feel like home to be with him. All right? In whom we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sins. All right, so who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature? For by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him. And as we continue to go over, and as long as the Lord has me preaching, I'm going to continue to go over this. So when y'all can start quoting it back to me, we'll just preach it together, okay? That he didn't create us. He created the world, formed his creation, breathed into that creation, and created us as a living soul from his own breath out of what he had already created. All right? So we are souls with a body. And we sort of have a connection to both the soul and the body, but we are souls in a body, not bodies who technically have a soul. All right? That is, if you ever go through any Christian mythology, it's probably all Catholic. They have the we're bodies with a soul thing. It's the other way around. We are souls with a body. All right? Right now it's a dying body. Soon enough it will not be a dying body. But we are souls with a body. He did that. He created, as it would say in Latin, ex nihilo. He went in and he spoke. Depending on how you read it, maybe he spoke, maybe he sang it. But whatever, he spoke into being, and creation was created. And we can go through the Genesis account of how he did all of that and creating the light and the dark and the sun and the stars and the earth and the waters and separating the animals and going through all of creation. And we can go back through the book of John and how it says that everything that was created, there was nothing that was created that wasn't created by him. All right? He is the preeminent of his creation because he's the one that created it. Amen. All right? But that's not really what he's talking about here. It's part of the context, all right? It is the foundational context for that. He is the creator, and he created all of that, and you are a part of it. And we keep going over it so that you will know your place in the created order. Go back into Hebrews and where you are with the angels and all of that relationship between you and him and you and the rest of creation. But that's only the backdrop of what he's trying to say here. Because outside of the word creature in verse 15, have you noticed he's not talking about any actual creation? He's not talking about horses or giraffes or planets or anything like that. He's talking about authority. He just listed every single type of authority there was. He's saying that he is the author and the creator of every single authority structure that exists. Amen. And that he is the preeminent, he is I'm losing I can't read. Let's see. Firstborn of the invisible God, firstborn of every creature, for by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him. So he's the one that, because he had the authority to create, that'll blow your mind if you really just stop and think about that sentence. But because he had the authority to create, he is the first of authority. Can you describe it that way? So all of the authority that we understand, whether it be king, president, prince, mayor, governor, your boss, husband, father, mother, whatever authority you either are in a position of or in a position under, he is the one who created that level of authority. All right? We might have given it the name mayor, governor, president. We might have applied the title, and we might have socially sort of designed sort of the boundaries and the limits of the authority and what they have authority over. But the level of authority and the position he created is an extrapolation, just like having him breathed into that in the clay vessel and created a human. And part of him, that clay vessel, that human, was in the image of the one who breathed into him. All of authority is an extrapolation of the authority that he has in the heavens. Oh, just as we are, it's a lower version, it's a lower form of it. No, but it's all the direct result of the fact that he is the God of authority. All right? And so far in our description, all of these work together. All right? In his description of this, there isn't any conflict between thrones, dominions, principalities, powers, and all things that are for him and by him. There isn't any conflict in this. This was true before the fall in the Garden of Eden. All right? Think about that. There wasn't enough people to have a president. Had there been, there would have been. All right? Because all authority was established by God before the fall. All right? And it functioned the way it was supposed to. It was friendly authority. it was, we think of authority now and we think of Game of Thrones, whether you've seen the show or not. That's irrelevant. It's you win the throne or you die. It's a bunch of people. And I'm going to get shot in the South for saying this one. But it's the difference between having a good, well-functioning military with an authority structure, and then going out of that and people who like the idea of the military and forming a very loosely based militia where all of the members want to be in charge, but acknowledge there has to be a hierarchy, but at the end of the day, they all want to be in charge. And so they might model it after a well-formed army, but it's just a bunch of individuals doing army-like things in that way. And again, I'm in the South. I know I'm going to get shot for that. Not all militias are horrible. I'm describing bad ones. All right. All authority is good authority. It was designed by God. If there's any bad authority, it's because we twisted it and abused and took it for ourselves instead of being under authority the same way that he has given us authority. And this is no matter what position it is, whether it's an official social position, whether it's in that family and being a father or a husband or something like that. But all of authority was created by him, was established by him as a good thing. Boy, do we hate that. But what I want to describe here is this authority is our context for home. All right? It is our context. Now, I'm going to keep using musical terms here. It's our context for home. It's our context for where everything else is compared to. So that if there is something off, if there's something distant, if there's something too far away from home that pushes back to home, it's because we have either gone outside of this authority structure before God, or we have, at least in our hearts, despised it and are struggling and fighting against it. There's a spectrum. The farther away you get, the more you hate the fact that God is in control. This is his creation. I'm his, you're his. Whether you're born again or not, you're his. He created you. He can do anything with you that he wants to. Right? And not be a bad God. That gives moral philosophers a really hard time in this day of age. I mean, they'll argue that one to the end of the earth. But here he is. But he is before all things, and by him all things consist. Every way that you get to interact with the world is based in the way that he designed the world. And like all of our modern culture is doing, we're trying to erase all of the old definitions and replace them with new definitions, and then try to guilt trip you into acting off of the new definitions and make you feel like you're crazy because it's like all of things just mean something different now, 20 years later. And he is before all things, and by him all things consist. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have preeminence. That's the word I was looking for earlier. Preeminent. In all things he might have preeminence. And so we've got to go back into our context. He created everything. In having created everything, he put it into order. This order we call authority structure. And it worked. Everything was harmoniously working together. Everybody had their job to do. Everybody did it. The birds flew, the fish swam, Adam named everything. Everything was going great. The angels had their hierarchy and authority, and they did everything until, and we can argue this one till we're blue in the face about what happened first as far as Lucifer trying to ascend and then falling. Was it before or after the Garden of Eden? We can go through all of those arguments. They're entertaining. But we know that it was working. And then Lucifer decided that he didn't want to be a part of that structure anymore. He would prefer this not to be a well-formed army. He wanted his own militia where he was going to be in charge. He was going to ascend and be like the Most High and cause that war. And then that war spilled over to us, and we fell. And in doing so, we left the army and formed our own militia and attempted to recreate all of his authority structures on our own without him being the head of it. All right? We left we took his context and we made it a completely new context. All right? We went from the kingdom of his dear son, and we created the powers of darkness. Lucifer, everybody who felt the falling, and let's just put it that way for ease. Any theological arguments? You can write Pastor Jonathan Riddle. We had one context, and now we lived in a different context. And all right and wrong is based in who is being violated. We no longer associated with that anymore. So why should we care what he considers to be sin? We're not under his power authority. We are under his power, but from our perspective, we reject that. So if God says it's a sin, who cares? Because I'm not in that army anymore. I'm in this one. And this one, I'm the head. No matter how many people are above me, I'm in charge. And so my context is me. And if my context is me, I can't sin because I don't go against me. Right? So what is this sin that you're trying to convince me of that is in this context? There's an enmity between God and man. There's a war. There's a constant fighting because he says, I'm God, and we say, no, you're not. And this is why, in whom we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sins. Everything that had to happen, that we ripped ourselves from this context and demanded this one, and lived our life seeing life from the world of the power of darkness that was, I'm in charge, and if I'm okay with it, it ain't sin. And my entire conflict is demanding that you not see what I do as sin. That war is still raging in the world. I mean, you go anywhere, that's the war that's raging. I demand that you see what I do as not being sin. Even though there's a clear standard by our Creator. Right? So, this is what he did. This got as close to over here as possible, meaning that he never left that authority structure, but came into this physical world where the rest of all of this actually existed in the physical world. He came in a human body and got as close to over here as possible, not in the powers of darkness, but in the human world, took on flesh, and then died in the power of darkness place so that people here could be translated way back over here, so that it's not just a matter of location, but their internal context was completely changed so that they now saw themselves as underneath God in a way that was back to original design, yeah, even better than original design, because there is now not just back in the correct authority structure, but there is no fight with the internal authority structure. There is complete connection and belonging in this authority structure before God. Is this making sense? This isn't too abstract. Y'all are getting this? Okay. So, he created, and creation died. And in order to redeem creation, he had to bring it back to life. But bringing it back to life isn't good enough. He didn't hit the rewind button on existence and make it so that we never left. He stopped. He actually was willing to die to redo everything. Right? Not start again, completely start over with new creation that will be completely fulfilled in us when we get our new bodies and new heaven and earth and all of the completion of that. No, it's already a not yet situation. No, but it's not a start over, it's a complete redo. Okay? And in this redo, just like the last time he created an authority structure context, he created a new authority structure context. We call that the church. We call that the unity of the believer, each having our own different function. I'm using the authority hierarchy, but that translates to, okay, you're the hand, you're the foot, you're the ear, you're the eye. We all jointly fit together working as one body. The law that works in my new member. All right? And he is the head of this body. So just as all authority came out of his authority, just like all your soul came out of his breath, everything was an extrapolation of him that grew. He is now the head of the church, so that the church is now an extrapolation of him in this new context. All right? He is home. He is the one that, as he takes us on all of the journeys, it resolves back to being in his presence over and over and over again. That things sound distant, things sound off when we feel like we're too far away from where he was leading us, and he brings us right back to being in his presence. All right? And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have preeminence. He's the beginning, he's the firstborn. He's the one that started this entire new creation thing. And all this new creation thing is a result of what he did, but he's also the first one that did it. He was the first one that rose from the grave. And there will be a time when we will all rise with him in new bodies just like he had. But he was the first, but he wasn't just the first. He's the what's the word I'm looking for? The primary, the one we are out of. For it pleased the Father. All right? Now this is their context again. All right? God the Father was pleased for God the Son to do this. And God the Son was pleased to please his Father in doing this. And God the Son was pleased to do this with you because he loves you when you were a part of himself. You were a part of himself. You rejected. He made you a part of himself again because you're his and he loves you. For it pleased the Father that in him should all fullness dwell. See, he's going through this over and over again because this is the context for why something is right and wrong. Does it go against how he created it to be? But also, does it go against how he is with you, how he expects you to be with him, and how he expects you to be with others? Because it's all connected and tied together with the multifaceted world that he did not create anything simple. He created a very complex, multifaceted world that all has one main context. He's the head, we're with him, and in being with him, he works, moves, and breathes through you. For it pleased the Father that in him should all fullness dwell. And having made peace through the blood of his cross, by him to reconcile all things unto himself. By him I say, whether they be things in earth or things in heaven. That is hinted at in Scripture. There's some things in Scripture that are more of a mystery than others. And there's a lot of extra biblical writings that can be entertaining, but they're not Bible, so we don't trust in them. I really, really am curious how he reconciled things to himself in heaven. All right? That's going to be, I want to sit down for 1,000 years and just hear that story. All right? And I maybe hear it from Jesus, and then after he's finished telling it, go find a random angel and get them to tell it from their perspective, because what in the world, the very premise of Genesis was that we could be redeemed and the angels can't. So if the angels can't, how is he redeeming anything in heaven? I want to know this. All right? But having made peace, that means there was a war. You don't need to make peace when there already is peace. You make peace when there is war. So that gets us back to our description between the kingdom of his son and the powers of darkness, and how we got here and why, and different contexts attacking each other, all of that we just described. He made peace between those, not in the powers of darkness were the enemies of God, so he made a treaty to not attack each other anymore. This isn't that kind of peace. All right? This is the peace that comes only through total victory. All right? Complete domination, and he wins. Hands down. There is no debate. There is no questioning. There was a war. He won it. All right? Now, there might be a little bit of argument and conflict while all the pieces are being mopped up throughout the years until final, but that's just because, I'm in the South, I'm going to get a shot for this one too. It's like people driving around with Confederate flags in America. It's like a defeated nation is being proclaimed, and they have the freedom to describe a defeated nation. We have the temporary ability to proclaim to still be under the powers of darkness. Temporary. Because the battle was completely won. Amen. All right? He's just giving us an already not yet, so that we can plunder hell and populate heaven. All right? So having made peace through the blood of the cross, going back and describing the war, of why this was necessary in the first place, he did something. He reconciled. And we should all be in awe of that word, reconciled. All right? Because redeemed is a fun word. You get a coupon for a free day at the park. You want to spend that day at the park? You take the coupon and you redeem it for your free day at the park. All right? You purchase it. It's a purchasing word. All right? I have fun coupons, which is what we call money. I want to buy something. I give them my fun coupons. And they give me my thing. I have redeemed that thing. I have purchased it back. Okay? And that's wonderful. But reconciliation is a little bit different. Reconciliation has an inherent implication. The implication being that we were once together. You can't reconcile if you were never together in the first place. All right? I can't get back to you if we were never together. Reconciling is getting back to. All right? This is the description that there was a moment you were a glisten in atoms. I mean, really far back in that, way back there. But you were created in Adam. You were created perfect. Don't let anybody have this argument, especially in the modern LGBTQ argument of I was created this way. No, this problem you might have been under a curse, and you might have had that close to your birth, but you weren't created when you were born. You were created all the way back there. You were created perfect. You were in God when he breathed into Adam. Or you were in Adam when God, no, breathe words. You were alive. You were created way back then. And then you fell in Adam. And so now when it's your time to shine, you have to be reconciled to a position that you don't remember. Because your memory is based in your physical, biological brain and not in your soul. By him reconciled all things to himself, brought you back into a right position with God that you never remembered having been in the first place. But because you never have remembered being there in the first place, you have no personal identity with it. Context matters. Context matters. You have no personal identity with it. So you have no idea what it's like to be that. Yes. So he had to not just redeem you, he had to translate you. Not just practically because you were dead in sin and he didn't want you to keep a dead soul. There's a lot of practical reasons for the translation, but there's a personal, subjective context need for it as well, because you don't know what it's like. But he reconciled you to himself to bring you back to the relationship with him that he originally designed for you to have. Just better. Amen. And I say, whether they be things on earth, that would be us. Again, I'm really curious about that, or things in heaven thing. And you, that were sometime alienated and enemies in your mind by wicked works, yet now hath he reconciled. If it sounds like he's repeating himself, it's because he is. You were alienated. Let's try to do this. You were created in the kingdom of his Son. You fell. And you became part of the kingdom of darkness. All right? That happened. All right? That was home. That was the original context. Not only was that your original subjective context, all right, where you came from, this is the context of all creation. Everything that exists in the context of God is creator. All authority structures are designed by God, flow out of God. All of the way physics works and math works, all of that, it works together because it was designed by God to function together in all of the complex authority structure underneath his kingdom. Right? This is the way all of creation is. You're over here. This is all you subjectively experience. So this is all you believe there is. But that's all there is. You see this problem? That means you are alienated from reality. All right? But being alienated from reality doesn't mean that you associate yourself with reality. You associate yourself with how you experience the world. So I see myself this way, and everybody else around me is in the same Game of Thrones battle, trying to be king and declaring their own authority and all that we've already gone over. And this is what we think is normal and the way the world really is. So that is weird. All right? That doesn't fit the way we see the world. This fits the way we see the world. All this infighting and battle and bickering, and it's in everything from our biological diseases to our politics. It's just fighting and death and destruction, and in the entirety of this kingdom. So we are alienated. We don't feel alienated because we feel like we're normal. Because from our perspective, it's normal. But we are alienated from reality as God made it and as it was designed to be. So you were sometimes alienated in your mind by wicked works. Now, this is not a bad translation. We just have really bad English now. So let's not read it badly. In your mind does not mean that you're really here, but in your mind you're acting like you're here. All right? You're not just in a state of delusion. All right? No, you are alien. You are seeing the world the way from the position that you really are in. All right? There's no delusion of you're only alienated in your mind. All right? You are actually alienated. But in being alienated in sin, you sin. Fair enough? All right. We sin, and by sinning, we reinforce in our mind that this is true reality. So we are alienated in our mind by our actions that reinforce and prove to us that we really are alone in fighting this battle on our own. You're all you got. Your sin's not sin. You're all you got. You live your truth. You live your way. You live unapologetic. All the different catchphrases and slogans you get in the world. Even 90s burger commercials. I know what good is. Maybe that's too old for people in the room. All right. Have it your way. Same company. All right. We were alienated. We act alienated. So we convince ourselves that that's the alien. Right. You're sometimes alienated and enemies in your mind by wicked works, yet now hath he reconciled. Everything he's translated us and brought us back into seeing the world this way, just in a brand new context of the church. He's improved this into the church to bring us closer to him. All right, so church and kingdom of his son, we're going to use those interchangeably. Although there is a temporal, or there's a growth there. In your mind, is he reconciled in the body of his flesh? That's what it took. It took him coming out of his kingdom and getting into the created order in order to take us out and bring us back into his context. In the body of his flesh through death, for a reason, to present you holy and unblameable and unreprovable in his sight. All right, and as we played on these words last week of holy and alienated. All right, holy is set apart in perfection, and he's got to describe it that way because there ain't no perfection here on earth. So separating from here into his perfection. But if you followed this, all of the created order is in a structural authority system, so that is connection. Do we get that? His created order, the kingdom of his son, is complete connection. It is home. It is the way I relate to you, the way you relate to me, the way we're designed and supposed to. Up is up, down is down. It all works. That is everything being connected and interacted. The unity of the body, the people working together. We all function together and work the way we should. That is ultimate connection with each other, with created order, with God. It's the way it's supposed to be. Being all for ourselves is alienated. Being separate from that is connection. So holy is connection, while it feels like alienation here. Because holiness is being alienated from my alienation. All right? This is how alienated and enemies in your mind by wicked works. This is how twisted our own personal context is, to see the complete functioning of his order and design and how we fit in it and are connected to the way he works with everything as somehow being lonely and set apart and by myself. That's the fallen context, judging that, because I refuse to acknowledge that I should be under his authority. I am under his authority, that I am his. He says, no, I am mine. Go back into some good old 90s grunge songs. I am mine. All right. In the body of his flesh through death, to present you holy and unblameable and unreprovable in his sight, if, this is not an if, meaning you can lose your salvation. This if is not referring to the act of translation or reconciliation. This if is referring to presentation. What was the previous verse? To present you holy and unblameable and unreprovable in his sight. This if is for his ongoing work with you to present you a certain way. All right? if ye continue in the faith, grounded and settled, if you don't remove yourself from home, if you don't stop seeing the world the way he said it is, if you don't stop seeing your position before him the way he said you are, if you don't start seeing your neighbor the way he said your neighbor is and how you're supposed to be unified with him in the church, if you don't lose home, if you don't do that tritone substitution and find something else as being what feels like being resolved and being at home, if you don't change where you're coming from, if you continue in the faith, grounded and settled, and be not moved away from the hope of the gospel. Hope of the gospel is just one small phrase for everything that I've been talking about this entire morning, about how he's recreated all of this to bring you back to life. But not bring you back to an old life, bring you back to a new, fully established, connected life. If you continue in the faith, grounded and settled, and be not moved away from the hope of the gospel which ye have heard, and which was preached to every creature which is under heaven, whereof I, Paul, am made a minister. And it almost sounds like he's changing subjects, but he's not. Who now rejoice in my sufferings for you, and fill up that which is behind of the afflictions of Christ in my flesh, for his body's sake, which is the church. Let's remove some very bad readings of this. Jesus came, went to the cross, loved us so much that he couldn't help but heal and do all sorts of stuff on the way to the cross, because that's the kind of God he is. But he came, he suffered, and he died. He was born again. He did not miss any sufferings. All right? He suffered 100% of the sufferings that needed to be suffered. All right? He did not leave any for you. There is a pragmatic reality that if you follow him, the world will treat you the same way it treated him. All right? There is that reality. There is a suffering of being separate from the world and being translated into his kingdom because we're practically still living in the world and the world doesn't like it. So there is a reality to there being some suffering here, different than the way the world suffers. So I'm not preaching against suffering. I'm saying that you don't have to suffer in order to be a Christian. All right? God didn't do 90% of the suffering and leave 10% for you to make sure that you're willing to be a Christian. No, go back in history and people thought they had to have a martyr merit badge. And so they would go through and provoke a fight in their sharing the gospel so that they would get killed and they could say they were a martyr. That's not what's going on here. He's not saying that I'm in prison because I've got to suffer to prove to you that Jesus is real. That's not what's going on here. All right? Who now rejoice in my sufferings. Anybody here rejoice in sufferings? It sounds like an oxymoron, right? All right. I've got to describe this one musically. All right. First time I've had a Bible as sheet music. All right. We went through... Give him a second to move the camera, I think. We're still in our context. We've got home. We've got our fifth. Still connection. Remember, we've got 12 notes that work out into 30 keys. And for our 12 notes, we've got 7 in a key. That means there are 7 notes that go together without a huge amount of dissonance. And the other 5 are the really dissonant ones that don't seem to go in that key. All right? So, as we've talked about, remember that word I was mentioning before, tritone. Right? The tritone is the one that will easily make you go to a different home. All right? This is the tritone. In a different key, that's a tritone. All right? Every key has a tritone. All right? So, if I'm doing what I've been doing No, you heard that? I'm changing my home again. All right? This is a tritone to that. It adds that one note that just shouldn't be there, which in your brain makes you want to move somewhere else. All right? But if I do this, all right? See how that result, that I'd stay home. I kept my original home. This is a tritone. I played the tritone that is in the key. All right? And it didn't change keys. So that means the second biggest form of dissonance that there is fits. All right, we'll get there. All right. I rejoice in my sufferings for you all, that I fill up that which is behind of the afflictions of Christ in my flesh for his body's sake, which is the church. So you can be going through and do the most dissonant thing you can, and it not sound dissonant at all. Anybody hear the dissonance in that? It doesn't sound like it's there, does it? That's the second most dissonant thing you can hear. And you didn't hear any dissonance because it felt natural. It felt right. It was in key. It was in context. It's the way things should be. All right? But if I were to play this, it's going to move me somewhere else. All right? You have two warring natures, and you are going to have dissonance in one of them, no matter what. They're fighting each other. Kingdom of sun, kingdom of darkness. This isn't a good versus evil of your actions are going to choose which one you're landing in. You've been translated. You're in this one. Your physical body is still in this one. All right? Yeah, you hadn't gotten a sin out of this dying, decaying body. All right? So what sounds really far from home here fits perfectly here. Now, the question is, which one feels weird to you? In which context do you hear the dissonance? Our body hates suffering. It just does. We run away from pain. We run towards pleasure. We'd have to have a really, really good reason to be willing to put up with pain. Right? You don't rejoice in suffering. You might be willing to put up with it. All right? But that's a far cry from rejoicing in it. All right? Here, you'd be willing, for interesting reasons, people will put up with pain here if it means something to them. But even though it means something to them, it will always be dissonant. They will always hate it. Here, there is none. There is only the removal of here. Dissonance here is anything that removes me from this position. Because this is home. This is where I'm supposed to be. This is where I'm connected to my Savior. This is where I'm connected to you. This is the way the world was designed to be. So removing me from home is this dissonance that I'm not supposed to be over here. I'm supposed to be with my God. Anything that would dare to try to remove me from his presence, to displease my God, it doesn't have any place here. Yes. But anything that would remove me from my presence of my God automatically causes me suffering over there. You're going to have it's going to be dissonant in one of the two places. It's either going to satisfy me and remove me from there, in which it's going to drive me nuts. Conviction, all the talking between me and the Holy Ghost is going to drive me absolutely insane. You can, as believers, we can sin, but not for long, because it's going to drive us nuts, because it's like us taking a step away from where the context I'm supposed to be in. But not sinning drives our flesh nuts. So he what did it say? He rejoices in his suffering. He is thrilled to death that his body can't stand what he's doing. It means the world to him that his body can't stand what he's doing, because how this body's screaming, how dare I be treated like, how dare I not get what I want? How dare you speak that way to me? How dare you say I'm wrong? How dare I have to be ridiculed by other people? How dare I have to go through this? This is not worth it. And your soul inside screaming, it's worth it and more. Because I'm not willing to leave the presence of my God just to satisfy whatever you want. So I rejoice in my suffering, because my suffering is not dissonant to me. My suffering is not taking me away from home. My suffering is because I'm demanding to stay at home. And because I'm demanding to stay at home, my enemy, which is the other half of myself, hates it. And so that little dissonant note is going really hard in my human life. But deep down in my soul, I'm at peace. There is no warning bell flashing off right here. There might be some human discomfort, but I'm glorying in that, because the human discomfort without those warning bells going off, I'm connected to that. I have continued in the faith, grounded and settled. He's working and he's growing, and everything that me hates grows me here. Who now rejoice in my sufferings, not because I want to suffer, but because I'm not suffering, and my dead flesh hates it. For you, and fill up. For him, that was prison. For you, that, I don't know, that we're very spoiled. It could be not having the right cell phone. We're that spoiled. Who now rejoice in my sufferings for you, and fill up that which is behind of the afflictions of Christ. There's a strange passage in one of the Gospels, I'm forgetting at the moment, where it says there are some that are born eunuchs. Yes. And there are some that are eunuchs by choice, because to fulfill their lust would be to go against who they are in Christ. Yes. So they would be willing to be suffer eunuch in the flesh, because they have no desire whatsoever to leave the presence of their God in sin. And the world would hate that teaching. The world, and I've heard these teachings before, the world would twist those verses into trying to say that Jesus was proclaiming a position in the kingdom of heaven for transgenderism. I've heard some messages, I'll tell you what. No, it's not. That is that I refuse, even if that is the difficulty I'm dealing with in life, I would much rather this body suffer than my soul be separate from my Creator, because there's peace here. And I would glory in that suffering. If there's going to be dissonance, that dissonance is going to be over there. Who now rejoice in my suffering for you, and fill up that which is behind of all the afflictions of Christ in my flesh, for his body's sake, because my soul's alive. But that flesh has got to die daily. What was the afflictions of Christ? The one who was the creator of all, the source of all life, had to die. Can you imagine a greater dissonance than that? Can you imagine a farthest from home as you possibly get, the one who is the source of life dying? The sufferings of Christ. Having to put to death that which thinks it's alive. Wherefore I am made a minister according to the dispensation of God, which is given to me for you, to fulfill the word of God, even the mystery which has been hid from ages and from generations, but now is made manifest to his saints, to whom God would make known what is the riches of the glory of the mystery among the Gentiles. The mystery is what I've been talking about. I have no doubt I've been talking about it using words that you've never thought of to describe it that way, trying to do this in a very fresh way. But this mystery of the working of God that he put in the prophecies, and it was all throughout the Old Testament, but it was never overtly taught. It wasn't overtly known. It was only known to those who really studied and were really there, and who were looking forward to the completion of the promise, but most of them were like, however that is going to be. All right? The mystery, which has been hid from ages and from generations, but is now made manifest to the saints. And we're in sort of a transition time, so he's saying, made manifest to the Jews and to the Gentiles. We've been engrafted in. All right? That to whom God would make known what is the riches of the glory of the mystery. So that's saying he's made it manifest to his saints, and all the stuff that he's made manifest to his saints, he's making manifest to the Gentiles as well, and making them saints. This is the hope. Christ in you. Yes. The hope of glory. That you who were alienated but believed you were all that, has been translated into the kingdom of his Son and reconciled to him. And that reconciling is not just having been forgiven, which is a glory, but not just having been forgiven, because just being forgiven implies being forgiven and let go on your own, but in forgiven and engrafted in and reconciled and put back underneath the headship of Christ. So the riches of the glory of the working of God is not that that he saved you, but he brought you into himself and restored you and recreated you, and new heaven and new earth, recreated creation so that you might fit exactly where you were designed to. And in doing so, completely fulfill your context for life, knowing that because of that, you will never be alone again. He is your hope. He is your glory. He's your head. Amen.